Welcome to Money Matters. My name's DCrowell from Mortgage Network. My usual compatriot Emily Johnson from Polaris Capital is not here this week, so I'll be taping the show by myself. We are this morning, or actually whenever you're looking at this, you don't know whether it's morning or evening. We are going to talk in the first half about the happenings of the last week, the general economic happenings of the last week, and how they bear on Beaufort County, which is what we always try to do, take the international news, the national news, and reduce it to the economic impact locally. So in the first half, that's principally what I'd like to do, with a lot of concentration on health care, since that's the major and dominant political reality at the moment. And then in the second half of the show, I'd like to talk very locally about the equation of renting versus buying, and what goes into making that decision, and what the costs and benefits of both are. So starting with the outside world, this has been a rollicking week in the political healthcare debate arena, and there's been four separate proposals that have been put forward by the Republicans in the Senate, and each has failed to be passed by the Republicans in the Senate. The Democrats are sort of standing on the sideline, wringing their hands, and at the same time is chuckling because the Republicans have been unable to agree on a health care proposal to even put forward. The issue here is not really a political one. It's a basic, very, very basic philosophical one, and it is whether fundamentally you believe that health care is a right or a privilege. In other words, is it a right that comes with being a citizen of the United States, that in some way, some shape, or some form, that the government will guarantee that you have health care as a citizen of the United States? Or is it a privilege to be achieved, bought, sold, paid for, according to your means, according to your station in life? If you're rich, you get good health care. If you're poor, you get bad health care. If you're very poor, you get no health care at all. That's the extreme on the one side. Government guaranteed health care is the extreme on the other side. So those are the two positions. The other major and quite separate position in healthcare, which is woven into those two positions. So remember the two positions. Is it a right? Or is it a privilege? Woven into the midst of that debate is an acknowledgement that, to a large extent, one needs a coherent system of delivery, simply because healthcare is so huge, so vast, so complicated, and so critical. You need an organized delivery system. The question is whether the private sector businesses will be the delivery system for healthcare, or will the government be the delivery system for healthcare? And the argument rages. That becomes much more of the political argument as to who manages and controls the delivery system. It is already the case that 40% of births in America are paid for by Medicaid. Poor, indigent, and women in households earning less than $30,000 a year already have their pregnancies paid for by Medicaid. All elderly people in the United States ultimately end up being paid, having all medical care, which is the most expensive medical care. Basically, you can go an entire lifetime, 65 years, spending X amount on your total health care, and your last 5 years, 65 to 70 or 70 to 75 or whatever your last 5 years are, will end up outspending by a factor of 2 or 3 all that you've spent for the previous 65 years of your life. All of that end 5 years of medical expense is already paid by Medicare and by Medicaid, which are government programs. So there's a certain nonsensical element in the entire debate and an enormous amount of political grandstanding, because the cake is already baked. Obamacare isn't Obamacare. Obamacare is a system that opened the doors is a program that opened the doors a slight bit wider of a system that was already in place. Essentially, Obamacare allowed a very major increase in the Medicare and Medicaid rolls in the country. And in addition, it eliminated some loopholes in the insurance delivery system for pre-existing conditions and certain number of things there. But essentially, it was an expansion of a delivery system that's already in place, and the repeal and replacement of Obamacare would be a diminution of a system that's already in place. What makes the argument so intense, and it should be non-political, is that you're really talking only about a delivery system. You can tinker with the mechanics, but you must have a delivery system. Otherwise, quite literally, someone will die. If there's no delivery system, medical care doesn't go out to someone somewhere, or some tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people somewhere. The question is, John McCain, great Republican senator, was recently diagnosed with a form of cancer. He was rushed into emergency operations. He did well in those emergency operations. He had the finest medical care available in the United States. He was able to get out of hospital in 5 days or 6 days, and rushed back to the floor of the Senate. I heard a medical panel last night discussing the level of care that he got, how he got it, how he was diagnosed, the tests that took place in order to form the diagnosis, in order to get him the medical care and the operation that was necessary. The medical panel concluded that there were 1 in 10,000 Americans that could have gotten that care. So it's not really a debate. That level of care is rarely, if ever, available to anybody in a public market. Just can't be done. And what we're really discussing here is basic care for basic conditions, not John McCain medical conditions, but basic conditions for our entire population. At the moment, that is delivered in a messy way. People who don't have insurance get medical care by going into the emergency room, and the hospital foots the bill. I know many people who have arrived at the hospital, been diagnosed with serious conditions, entered the hospital, ultimately entered intensive care for periods of time and exited the hospital, leaving a bill behind of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's the way our system works. The hospitals have to give the care by law, and everybody looks the other way, and especially politicians, and avoid the question of who's going to pay for that. So, there in a nutshell is the political debate and the substantive debate on health care, and we're all waiting anxiously to see what happens next week. See you in the second half of the show.